Thank you very much, and welcome to this meeting of Cabinet. My name is Jonathan Lester, Leader of the Council, and I will be chairing the meeting. In addition to those councillors present in the room, we have other councillors joining our meeting remotely. I will now check that we can hear them and see them, and they can see and hear us. So in no particular order, I have Councillor Fagan.
Good afternoon, Councillor Lester. I can see and hear you, thanks.
Excellent, welcome. Councillor Stark.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I can see and hear you, Leader.
Excellent, thank you very much. And we have Councillor Harvey.
Yes, Leader, I can see and hear you, but my connection's a little bit ropey, so I'll limit my my camera usage, and we'll just have to do without seeing me.
Understood. We will.
Manage.
Yeah, understood. We will try our hard to remember what you look like and try hard. Yes. And lastly, but by no means least, Councillor James.
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Excellent. Okay. And also joining us, we have Director Tina Russell. Thank you for joining us. Right. Okay, then. So I will now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Council's website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on Herefordshire Council's YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep the background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you're not speaking. Only one microphone will be able to be operational at any one time. If you have an issue with your microphone, please let the clerk know and we will allocate a new microphone to you. Please ensure that all devices are turned to silent. That's laptops as well, please. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If any members of the public attending do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please notify a member of staff. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives to provide the views of their group and raise any questions, clarification, and where appropriate, I'll ask chairpersons from scrutineers to comment. Voting will be undertaken by a show of hands by those councillors, cabinet members in the room. So thank you very much. We go on to the first item on the agenda, which is to receive apologies for absence. And we have apologies from Councillor Biggs and Councillor Ivan Powell. Any more apologies? If not, agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any Table A, Table B, or any other interests for items on the agenda today? No? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of December. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Our members, are you content that the minutes of the 18th of December are accurate and should be signed? Yep, okay, thank you very much. So agenda item 4 is to receive any questions from members of the public. Members of the public have the opportunity to submit questions to Cabinet in writing ahead of the meeting. We have received 9 public questions for this meeting, and the responses have been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those who have submitted a question have been given the right to ask the opportunity for a supplementary question, and that can be submitted or you can ask your question in public. Supplementary questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. I will now ask the clerk to confirm if any supplementary questions have been received.
We've had 4 written supplementaries and 3 people attending to ask supplementary questions from members of the public. If I do the written supplementaries first.
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
So the first supplementary is from Mr McKay for Councillor Hercombe. His question is, the ROWIP makes no mention of CRFs and CRBs, so an addendum is requested with an amplification of the public right-of-way glossary that says CRFs and CRBs were intended to be shown as roads used as public paths, plus a list of CRFs and CRBs. The LAF Local Access Forum, when asked, considering that it would not be appropriate to put a document raised by a member of the public on its web page, providing evidence-based information for raising DMMOAs supported by additional evidence, and providing a base for making the case to seek any additional funding required. CRFs and CRBs coming about due to government guidance using these non-statutory terms rather than RUPP. So will you reconsider and draft an addendum as was agreed?
Thank you for the question, Mr McKay. And Councillor Hercombe, if you could answer the question, please.
Thank you, Mr McKay. As stated above, following an officer review, this is not something that we are able to include in the rights of way improvement plan currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hercombe. Next question, please.
Second question is from Mary Albright for Councillor Swinglehurst. Sadly, my question about whether the Cabinet agree, having looked at the most recent data and documents, that the social and economic losses costs endured by housing restrictions are disproportionate and unjustified, wasn't answered. Nonetheless, we are relieved to hear that the Dilwyn Wetland project has finally been activated, and note that there are ample funds with Herefordshire Council from grants and credit sales to potentially accelerate other credit projects and meet the outstanding and projected need. We very much appreciate the support work that is undertaken by council officers with regard to private mitigation proposals, despite the ever-changing complexities of this, and we very much appreciate the positive meeting in December and the offer of follow-up meetings. Thank you. Would it be possible to prepare an overview of the council credit situation and any long-term credit delivery plans, including timescales, credit costs, allocation processes, and the catchment area served by each council project, given that there is sadly still no meaningful or compliant wider catchment restoration plan from agencies, and that private mitigation projects are increasingly difficult?
Thank you very much for the question, and if I can ask Councillor Swinglehurst to answer.
So thank you for the question. The details of current and future phosphate credits, as they become available, are published on the council website, which is currently being updated. We are progressing as quickly as possible the development of the Phase 2 schemes. For example, we completed the acquisition of the land required for the Dilwyn Wetland scheme in November 2025. We intend to bring an update on all of the Phase 2 schemes to a Cabinet meeting in March, with information therefore in the public domain as to progress and timescales. The Council is also exploring options to work with private mitigation developers to increase the supply of credits. Similarly, the Council is also in discussions with Natural England regarding the recently announced environmental delivery plans, which we hope will improve the situation. The Council welcomes the ongoing discussions and information being shared by housing developers in helping our understanding of the impacts and to identify solutions with government to unlock future growth while protecting our outstanding local environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answer. And question 3 from Mr. Albright. That's for me.
Yes, so the question is, thank you for your positive response and the offer to write to the government on behalf of the SMEs and family businesses that are proud to call Herefordshire home. It is very disheartening to hear such despondency from a diverse range of sectors that have historically served our rural areas so well and who are integral to one another. The county, economy and rural communities, especially tourism, hospitality and housing. Is there anything that we can collectively do to help Herefordshire Council, the Economic Development Team and the Herefordshire Business Growth Board amplify and communicate our concerns to the government?
Thank you, Mr. Albright, for the question. It's an excellent question and an excellent supplementary question. We would encourage any businesses negatively impacted by these changes to also write directly to government to explain and to demonstrate how this is having a negative effect. It would also be helpful for businesses to share their specific experiences with the council and the Herefordshire Business Growth Board, so we can better explain the cumulative impact on our economy. Businesses impacted should please contact the Herefordshire Growth Hub team. We have a telephone number for them on our website, but it's 01432 383343, or please contact them by email, which is business@herefordshire.gov.uk to raise these very important issues. Thank you. So next question, please.
Is from Carol Prothero for Councillor Price. Question is, if the Hereford Southern Link Road does not unlock land for housing and help the county to meet the new increased housing demand from central government, why is the council not investing in other roads or infrastructure in the county, such as infrastructure that will unlock over 1,400 new homes south of Leominster and result in developer contributions towards the cost of the new infrastructure, reducing the impact of service cuts arising from this council borrowing £40 million for the Hereford Southern Link Road, which may or may not open up land for housing?
Thank you for the question. And Councillor Price, over to you.
Yes, thank you for your supplementary. Phase 1 of the Hereford Western Bypass is the first section of the wider bypass, which will unlock additional housing and employment land growth. It is an important first step, which clearly communicates the commitment to the delivery of the full bypass. The strategic outline business case for Phase 2 will be published later this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price. And next question is by Mr. Jeremy Milne, and he's here in person. So if I can ask you to come to the table and ask your question when you're ready.
For the benefit of our global audience, I will unscramble acronyms for those who are not familiar with them, and this may take me slightly over the minute. The Cabinet member misleads himself. The Home Lacey Road and Quiet Routes programmes were initiated by and funded during the previous administration for a completely different part of the city and have nothing whatever to do with this proposed bypass, let alone were they intended as excuses for its lack of active travel provision, as he seems to think. The Department of Transport's manual for streets and the Department's manual for roads and bridges, by placing pedestrians and cyclists at the top of the user hierarchy, require dedicated footways and cycleways for new peri-urban roads. How then will vulnerable non-motorised users needing safe and connected infrastructure be considered to avoid severance, inequality and exclusion caused by his bypass, now that his administration has redefined it as a housing growth corridor? And how will he persuade National Highways to adopt it as the A49 trunk, as he promises, when it is obviously deficient?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Milne. Councillor Price, would you like to answer?
I'm just having a think. Thank you, Mr. Milne, for yet another complex question. I'm afraid we're going to continue to disagree on this subject. The Phase 1 has planning permission, as was the rules and regulations at the time of getting that planning. We are coming up with the business case later this year, as I've previously said to you, and at that point we will explain entirely as to why, in my view and the view put forward to the Department of Transport with regards to the A49, that it is not necessary to have active travel measures as part of that road. We will continue to disagree on this, so you can ask me this question in every council meeting if you like, but my answer will be the same. We have taken on board the active travel measures for the Home Lacey Road, and that is deemed to be sufficient for active travel measures to support the building of the Phase 1 bypass. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price, for that answer to Mr. Milne's question. Next question is from Mrs. Morawiecka. If you can please take the chair and ask your question in due time.
On the basis of the information supplied in the answer, if borrowing £5 million has an annual impact of £400,000 per annum on the revenue budget from 28-29 onwards, then the full cost of borrowing 40 million will be circa 3.2 million per annum, or 1.4% of the proposed net revenue for 26-27. At para 2.7 of the medium-term financial strategy, it says, Each 1% increase in council tax generates approximately 1.5 million of recurrent funding to meet demand pressures and deliver the council's services. Is it proportionate or responsible for this council to either increase future council tax for all residents of Herefordshire by over 2% per annum, or alternatively to cut services across the county by a further £3.2 million per annum to fund a road where the claimed benefits are not supported by any factual evidence, particularly information such as the traffic modelling reports?
Thank you for your question, Mrs. Morawiecka. I would answer that in several ways. One of them is that it is a proportionate amount of investment when you see that it is absolutely imperative, given the financial picture of funding for local government, that we grow this our economy and we increase the council tax base so that we are sustainable for the future. What we will see over the next few years in terms of budgeting for this council, we will be making sure that we reprofile the services that this council delivers so that we maintain those key services that our Herefordshire residents rely on, whilst at the same time growing that council tax base so we can be sustainable for the long term. Thank you. And then lastly, we have question 7 from Mr. Osborne Brooks to Mr. Price, if you'd like to take your seat and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. The answer to PQ6 explains that the extra 5 million needed for the Southern Link Road Phase 1 will have an annual impact of £400,000 on the council's revenue budget from 2028-29 onward. Despite the answer saying this road will unleash Herefordshires' future, on the basis of the figures provided, borrowing over 40 million for this road could require over 3 million in service cuts over future years, and following an estimate for the cost of the entire bypass at over 300 million, cuts of over 24 million could be required in future years for the entire bypass. That's over 10% of the council's revenue budget. The council is already struggling enough to provide basic services thanks to government failure to fund local authorities properly. Therefore, I repeat my initial question: how has the council determined that it is better to cut future services, including public transport, active travel funding, etc., to repay the cost of the Southern Link Road alongside the cost of the entire proposed Hereford bypass?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Osborne Brooks. I think I've answered it pretty much in what I said just before, but over to you, Councillor Price.
Well, funnily enough, I was going to say exactly the same thing. So thank you for your supplementary question. I think the answer that the leader's just given you would suffice in exactly the same way to answer your question. So thank you for that. But you must understand that we are, as a council, we are committed to grow the economy of Herefordshire. And to do that, there are a number of capital projects that will unleash that potential, and this is one of them. So between the leader and myself, the answer, we should answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you very much for Councillor Price for your extra comments. Right now, again, thank you to members of the public for asking those questions. We do appreciate it, and it's important that the council receives questions on any key items, so thank you for those questions. Agenda item 5 is to receive any questions from councillors of this council. There are 53 councillors, and councillors are at liberty to ask questions of Cabinet at any time, but also in Cabinet meetings. So we have 2. We have 2 questions. Can I just confirm Councillor Hitchin is not here? No. So it will be Councillor Proctor for his question. We've provided a written response, but you have the opportunity to ask a supplementary if you so wish.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the answer. I'd just like to take issue with a couple of statements in it. It talks about users misusing Grok, but in fact they were using an explicit feature of the service that had been demonstrated by the owner of the company. And it still offers this feature, it merely doesn't offer it to UK IP addresses, and it has found that it is such an attractive feature it's made it a premium product. Even though he accepts in his answer that Grok is generating deeply harmful images, he argues that the fact that we can reach some people with council press releases on the platform outweighs this harm. But we don't simply use X, we heavily promote the service. We put it on every page of our website. It's appeared on every slide in public questions. He says that we will reassess our use of the platform should substantive improvements not materialise. He may not be familiar with the history of this company, but what improvements does the Cabinet member anticipate X delivering and by when?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Proctor, and Councillor Hercombe, if I can ask you to answer the question.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. I don't actually think your assessment of what I've said is accurate. We said that it was rightly drawing widespread criticism and condemnation, so we're certainly not supporting the activities of X in this instance. The ICO has published a statement on the 7th of January investigating X. Since then, X have banned that particular provision from UK servers. So, as you've identified, you can no longer do that. Now, if that ban does not hold, then we will certainly review our position. One thing I should point out is I've taken the advice of colleagues in the communications team on this. This is not my decision. This is their decision that I'm fronting. So they will continue to review it, and should the promised changes not materialise, then I'm sure that we will reconsider our decision.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hercombe. And thank you for the question, Councillor Proctor. Next item on the agenda is reports from scrutiny committees, but there are no reports from scrutiny to be received today. We will save that for the next Cabinet meeting, which will be on the 5th of February. So we will be able to have a feature at Cabinet from scrutiny committees, and I look forward to that agenda item accordingly. So we'll move swiftly on to agenda item 7, which is the draft budget for 2026-27, the revenue budget. To present the draft today of the budget, the medium-term financial strategy and the Treasury management strategy, the Council has a statutory responsibility to set a budget and council tax in advance of the new financial year. The 2026-27 revenue budget and medium-term financial strategy is put forward and will be recommended to Council in February the 13th, 2026. And this item begins on page 29 of the agenda pack. And I would like to ask Councillor Stoddart, our Cabinet Member for Finance, to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I introduce to you today the draft revenue budget for 2026-27 under very difficult and challenging times. This Conservative-led administration has consistently adopted an open and transparent approach in everything that we do. And as soon as we became aware of the potential impact of the Fair Funding Review 2 on our budget last summer, we publicly raised this as a major risk to our future financial position. Despite robust evidence and multiple case studies submitted in response to the consultation by Herefordshire Council and professional bodies advocating for fairer funding, which included the County Councils Network, the Rural Services Network and the Society of County Treasurers, all highlighting the impact of remoteness, unfortunately and sadly, the Labour government chose to ignore all of the information laid out in front of them and have taken a conscious decision not to support rural counties, as the revised funding formula places greater weighting on factors reflecting urban pressures and ignoring the additional costs of delivering services across sparsely populated rural communities. The outcome of the Fair Funding Review is a cut in funding for Herefordshire every year, with a total reduction of £17.3 million over the 3-year period. Today, I'm proud to introduce a balanced and deliverable draft revenue budget which totals £234.1 million for financial year 2026-27. The proposal includes a 4.99% increase in council tax, and estimates of central funding are to be confirmed following the publication of the final local government financial settlement in February 2026. This draft revenue budget assumes a total council tax increase, as I said previously, of 4.99%, a 2.99% increase in core council tax, and a 2% adult social care precept. This increases the Band D equivalent charge to £2,067.63, representing an increase of £8.19 per month, or £1.89 per week. To manage rising costs and demand for services, alongside reductions in the Council's allocation of funding from central government via the Fair Funding Review, the draft revenue budget includes savings proposals of £20 million, measures to manage directorate inflationary pressures via a centrally held contract inflation fund, and £3.2 million proposed use of the business rates reserve to mitigate the reduction in the Council's funding allocation in financial year 26-27. Nationally, local authorities continue to face significant financial pressures, whilst demand and cost of statutory services continues to rise, increasing the challenge of delivering transformation and improvements in the delivery of services to residents and businesses in Herefordshire. The proposed budget and strategy for 26-27 builds on the prudent approach and robust financial management now fully embedded across the Council to preserve and protect the Council's future financial resilience and sustainability through robust and reliable management of the revenue budget and capital programme and delivery of realistic, achievable and recurrent savings on time and in full. A sustainable financial strategy has been developed for 26-27 and onwards to ensure that the Council can achieve an ambitious programme of investment, service improvements and transformation to deliver the best for Herefordshire. Herefordshire has the fourth lowest population density in Hereford, approximately 189,000 residents across 842 square miles. And as such, the Council faces specific challenges and additional costs in the delivery of services to sparsely populated communities, provider market insufficiency, a higher proportion of older residents with increased demand for services, limited access to health and support services, difficulties in the recruitment of health care and social workers, and greater distances to access residents, increasing costs in the provision of waste services, transport and social care. In response to the Government's policy statement, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, who peer-reviewed the work which informed the Fair Funding Review, highlighted the lack of transparency in the decision to retain the recovery grant, stating it is difficult to see a principled basis for these decisions other than to achieve an overall allocation in line with the Government's subjective judgment. Government should avoid such formula bypasses becoming a habit, and the impact of this decision redirects £600 million of funding which would otherwise be available for distribution via the revised funding formula and reduces the overall pot of funding and allocation for Herefordshire. The outcome of the Fair Funding Review, therefore, has very serious implications for Herefordshire Council's funding position and delivery of services and our planned improvements to residents over the medium-term period. On the 17th of December 25, the Minister delivered a written ministerial statement to Parliament on the Provisional Local Government's Financial Settlement for 26-27. The provisional settlement for the first time in a decade is a multi-year settlement outlining multiple years' allocations of funding, covering the 3-year period from 26-27 to 28-29. Government calculations of the increase in core spending power, or CSP, for Herefordshire highlight an increase of £13.4 million in CSP over the settlement period. This increase, however, assumes the Council will increase council tax in line with the maximum permitted increase of 5% in each of the 3 years of the multi-year settlement. However, this headline from Government is misleading, with a total of £17.3 million reduction in Herefordshire's allocation of central government funding following redistribution through the Fair Funding Review, compared with the 25-26 baseline levels. And this means that the estimated increase in CSP, as calculated by Government, is expected to be funded entirely by local taxpayers via maximum annual increases in council tax, as the Settlement Funding Assessment, or SFA, drops from £88.4 million this financial year to 84.1 in 26-27, 77.7 in 27-28, and then 77.1 in 28-29. Figure 1 in the report, compiled by the RSN, shows the true state of government funding per head and shows that by the end of the current 3-year settlement period, Herefordshire will have 40% less government funding than urban authorities. Whilst urban authorities can expect a significant increase in government funding per head, compared with indexed 24-25 funding, they will receive 121% by 28-29, and English local authorities 118%, the analysis shows the position for rural authorities with a minimal increased funding per head of 103%, and Herefordshire's position as drastically disadvantaged by the outcome of the Fair Funding Review by receiving 77% by 28-29. This has been confirmed by the initial assessments by the RSN comparing the most rural with the most urban councils, and indicates that the most urban councils are expected to receive around 41% more per head in government-funded spending power than the most rural councils in 26-27. In 26-27, residents in the most rural areas are projected to pay around 20% more in council tax on average than most urban residents. By 28-29, the most urban authorities' spending power is expected to allow them to spend almost £100 more per resident on services than most rural councils. And between 24-25 and 28-29, government-funded spending power for the most urban authorities is expected to rise by around 21%, compared with around 1% for the most rural councils. And then by 28-29, these changes would result in the most urban councils having around 8% more spending power than the most rural councils. This is the real outcome of the Fair Funding Review for the residents of Herefordshire: a reduction in government funding and less resources to spend on services which benefit residents. I would now like to turn to explain how our income is derived. The table at para 36 of the report shows this clearly, but also shows how we're unable to compare like with like in respect of last year due to significant changes in this year's fair funding allocation, as against last year's legacy funding application, with many grants being rolled into the council settlement funding assessment. The 2026 business rates reset has resulted in a reduced budget for business rates income of £31.5 million for 26-27. This budget is significantly lower than the £47.6 million budgeted income in 25-26. And this is as a result of the system reforms, as part of which £11.5 million has been rolled into the revenue support grant for 26-27. In 23-24, Herefordshire Council joined the Herefordshire and Worcestershire Business Rates Pool, a voluntary arrangement between a group of local authorities whereby their combined business rates income and any growth is collected as one common fund or pool. In financial years 23-24 to 25-26, the Council received additional benefits totalling £2.1 million from the business rates pool, an average of £0.7 million in the 3 years. Due to the full reset of the business rates retention scheme and changes in the levy and safety net calculations, the Herefordshire and Worcestershire business rates pool will not continue in 26-27, and subsequent, the Council will no longer benefit from pooling gains, another impact on our income. The Council retains additional business rates income from the Hereford Enterprise Zone. The HEZ was designated by Government as one of the 48 enterprise zones in 2012, which is designed to boost local growth and create jobs in specialist sectors, including advanced manufacturing and engineering, agri-food, business services, construction including built, environment and security. The 26-27 revenue budget includes additional business rates income retained from the HEZ of £1.8 million. The Council will also receive an allocation of £4.2 million in 26-27 from the Extended Producer Responsibility for Packaging, the EPR scheme, first allocated to local authorities in 25-26. This funding is unring-fenced compensation to cover local authority existing costs of recycling and disposal of packaging. The Council's allocation has been included in the Economy and Environment Net Directorate budget in 26-27 to support relevant costs for waste and recycling services. I'm delighted today to announce that Herefordshire Council is introducing 30 minutes of free parking in every council-operated car park from April 2026. The Pop and Shop scheme is designed to make life easier for local people and to give our high streets a boost and meets one of our manifesto pledges. By removing the barrier for short stays, Pop and Shop encourages more footfall, more transactions and more activity on our high streets. It's a small intervention with a big impact, supporting the small and independent businesses that help keep our communities vibrant. However, to maintain car parks safely, reinvest in transport infrastructure and offset the income impact of introducing free parking, the Council is proposing an average of 8 to 10% increase in parking charges. For an hour's car parking, that is on average 15 pence. Less central, longer stay car parks used mainly by local residents and workers will retain relatively lower rates than the central, higher turnover car parks mostly used by visitors. Across all council car parks, the first 30 minutes will be free of charge. However, had tariffs increased in line with inflation since 23, the cumulative rise would have been around 17%, so the planned adjustment remain significantly below that level and have been structured to protect those who rely most on affordable parking. The recent corporate peer review confirmed that Herefordshire Council is a good council that is striving hard to improve further, with strong financial stewardship, and this council has chosen to take some tough but responsible decisions to balance the budget rather than opt for loans from government through the Exceptional Financial Support Framework. EFS is a form of temporary financial assistance to support a council to meet its financial obligations and to continue to deliver essential services. At paragraph 66 in the report, the process for EFS is fully explained. In simple terms, however, EFS is the equivalent of maximising your credit card, as it is only a short-term measure which will accrue interest and will require to be paid back to central government. A neighbouring county council has received £30 million of EFS this year and is applying for a further £70 million in 26-27, giving them a debt of £100 million, which will be subjected to annual interest of approximately 5.9%, and which, unlike prudential borrowing for capital projects, which then provide an asset, EFS only enables services to be delivered on the never-never. I can confirm that Herefordshire Council, unlike some of our neighbouring councils, will not be seeking a bailout or government loan or calling for 10% tax increases. However, what we will do is take tough but responsible decisions to control costs, protect essential services and keep the council financially stable. I'd now like to address the base budget proposed for 26-27, which is summarised at para 67 in the report. Directorate savings proposals are detailed in Appendix B, and key revenue budget pressures, challenges and risks are outlined in the individual Directorate budget position statements, which are all at Appendix C. Community and Wellbeing in 2026 has a proposed budget of £89,667,000, a reduction of £700,000 on last year. Children and Young People has a budget of £58.4 million, a reduction of £460,000 on last year. Economy and Environment has a budget of £38.29 million, a reduction of £2.7 million on last year. Corporate Services has a budget of £4.9 million, a slight increase of £270,000 on last year. And centrally, our central budget has £25,253,000, an increase in £6 million due to primarily on interest payments. The key budget pressures for 26-27, which total £29.3 million, are included in the draft revenue budget for 26-27 by Directorate and are as follows. The pay award. This pressure represents an impact of the estimated pay award for 26-27 on staffing expenditure across each Directorate. Inflation. This pressure represents the impact of inflation across contractual and non-contractual commitments in 26-27. Inflation is estimated based on a variety of relevant inflation and price indices, as well as contract-specific rates. And then finally, demand. Demand pressures reflect additional demand for services based on most recent activity, data and costs, and adjustments to reflect trend analysis in each service area. This year, we have made a decision to deal with inflation differently through the establishment of the Contract Inflation Fund to be managed via our existing expenditure controls. Inflation is estimated at £7.1 million in contracts for expenditure on supplies, services and third-party payments, will not be allocated directly to services as an increase in directorate-based budgets in 26-27. Each directorate has been set a target to manage inflationary pressures within directorate budgets, and this centrally managed contract inflation fund will be established to manage the inflationary increases which cannot be managed within directorate budgets, with amounts transferred to directorates through existing expenditure control processes when evidence of need has been demonstrated. The centrally managed fund will be established from directorate earmarked reserve balances and balance sheet provision amounts which have been assessed as not committed for use or required to manage future expenditure. And these comprise of the Budget Resilience Reserve of £4.2 million, additional pension cost reserve of £547,000, the uncommitted Economy and Environment Directorate reserves of £506,000, the uncommitted Children and Young People's Directorate reserves of £255,000, and then the uncommitted balance sheet provisions and sums of £1.56 million, giving us a total of £7.072 million. This measure recognises the inflationary pressures in 26-27 and makes adequate provision to meet the expenditure requirements of each directorate, while strengthening financial controls to ensure increased challenge and transparency over contract expenditure. The draft revenue budget assumes funding of £3.2 million from the Business Rates Reserve. As reported in the Council's earmarked reserves and general balances policy statement 25-26, this reserve is held to manage risks in the business rate regime, including the impact of changes in the level of business rates income and uncertainty over appeals. The audited reserve balance at 1 April 2025 was £13.3 million. It is proposed that this reserve is used in 26-27 to mitigate the loss of funding to the Council through the Fair Funding Review, this being the risk that the reserve was established to mitigate. Allocation of funding in 26-27 will reduce the reserve balance by £3.2 million, and is expected that further use of this reserve may be required over the multi-year settlement period to manage continuing further reductions in the Council's allocation of funding from central government. The balance remaining in the reserve is considered appropriate to manage and mitigate future funding risks. I would now like to address each of the Directorate's revenue budgets, but firstly, I would like to remind you all that this year we have created at Appendix C Directorate Budget Position Statements. These statements are further demonstration of our commitment to transparency and include comprehensive details of services, savings and capital plans for that Directorate. For those individuals who require more details on each of the Directorate savings plans or revenue costs, I would direct them to these very detailed statements. The Community Wellbeing Directorate is facing significant pressures in 2026-27 due to rising complexity of care needs, an ageing population, higher demand for temporary accommodation, and the increasing numbers of residents unable to fund their own care because of inflation and cost of living impacts. The budget reflects these growing cost pressures, including increased demand, more complex care needs, and inflation affecting both general services and health and social care contracts. To manage these challenges, the Directorate plans to control costs, better manage demand, increase income, and work with specialist partners to design and implement long-term transformation and efficiency improvements informed by detailed diagnostic work. The Children and Young People Directorate received £10.8 million in additional funding in 24-25, supported by a multi-year financial plan focused on workforce stability and reducing expensive placements. Over the period 24-25 to 26-27, the Directorate has delivered or proposed £9.8 million in savings, including £6.4 million achieved in the first 2 years, and further efficiencies planned through reduced agency staffing and reshaped servicing. An underspend of £2.7 million in 24-25 shows the Directorate has successfully reduced its base budget, and any future savings from 27-28 onward will form part of wider council savings plans, all of which whilst achieving an Ofsted grade of good and outstanding for management, which I think we have to acknowledge both Tina and Councillor Powell's significant work. Herefordshire Council's growing dedicated schools grant DSG deficit is temporarily ring-fenced under a statutory override until March 2028, preventing it from affecting the Council's ability to set a balanced budget. Nationally, DSG deficits are rising sharply, creating significant financial risk for councils, including the possibility of Section 114 notices, with Herefordshire's own deficit forecast to increase substantially due to ongoing high demand in SEND services. At 1 April 2025, the cumulative deficit brought forward was £20 million. The Q2 September 2025-26 forecast reports an overspend of £17.5 million within the high need block of the DSG, increasing the cumulative deficit to £37.5 million by 31 March 2026. A focused review to quantify the impact of emerging demand in 2026-27 and future years is currently underway to inform the Council's DSG deficit management plan, and it is expected that this will increase the forecast deficit by 31 March 2027. Unless future government reforms and funding resolve these pressures, the end of the override period will leave the Council facing major financial challenges, increased borrowing costs, and heightened pressures on reserves. Measures to contain the deficit and mitigate the future cost and demand pressures continue to be managed by the service through the DSG deficit management plan, and the financial impact of agreed mitigations will continue to be monitored and reported throughout the year as part of the Council's routine budget monitoring processes. Any deficit not funded through planned SEND reform and support from central government will have a significant impact on the Council's overall financial position once the override period ends on 31 March 2028. And this risk is being managed alongside the assessment of the adequacy of the Council's reserves as part of the Council's medium-term financial strategy. Turning now to the Economy and Environment Directorate. This will be sufficiently resourced to support growth in the economy in 26-27 and the delivery of major and capital projects. The Directorate will embed the new operating model for public realm services and continue to manage pressures in the operation of waste collection and disposal contracts arising due to growth in the volume of domestic waste and inflationary increases in the unitary payments. Savings proposals for 26-27 of £7.2 million will be achieved by maximising commercial activity and returns from traded services to increase income, managing demand by increased engagement with communities and partners, and delivering efficiencies by maximising the application of grant funding. These proposals are all detailed in the Economy and Environment 26-27 Directorate Budget Position Statement at Appendix C. There are significant pressures in the provision of mainstream home-to-school transport and SEND transport services nationally, and these are being experienced in Herefordshire. Growth in education, health and care plans for SEND students and increases in more costly travel, such as individual taxis and passenger assistance, intensify the challenge of delivering services within approved budgets. The provisional settlement notes that government intends to set out plans to reform the SEND system in further detail earlier this year. Ahead of any substantial reform, however, the Council must continue to manage increasing demand and cost pressures in transport services by identifying innovative strategies to influence demand using data to understand user requirements, maximising independence and reduce reliance on council transport services, and employ digital technologies to maximise opportunities to consolidate routes and deliver efficient journeys. An external review was commissioned by the Chief Executive in 25-26 to identify efficiencies across the Council's transport routes, reduce costs, and introduce a new operating model for transport services. The outcome of this review is expected to deliver savings of £0.5 million in 25-26, and as work continues, an additional savings target of £2 million is proposed in the 26-27 draft revenue budget. Turning now to corporate services, the budget requirement for 26-27 reflects investment in the Corporate Services Directorate to support continued delivery of service improvements and transformation across the Council, enabling the delivery of major and capital projects and providing high-quality corporate services to support delivery of the Council plan priorities across finance, legal and governance, HR and organisational development and transformation teams. I'm very pleased today to announce that following lobbying by a number of ward members, the corporate services budget now includes an allocation of £1,000 per ward member to allocate to community groups and projects within their ward area in 26-27 to align with the priorities of the Council plan. The full details of how this will be managed will be issued in the near future. Transformation expenditure in the Corporate Service Directorate will be mitigated in 26-27 through the application of £0.6 million of capital receipts. This application is permitted by statutory direction, and the Council is required to evidence compliance with qualifying conditions to its external auditors. The qualifying expenditure will generate efficiencies, ongoing savings and reductions in the cost of service delivery. The proposed application in 26-27 represents modest use of this flexibility by the Council. The central budget comprises financial transactions, minimum revenue provision and other corporate budget items including pension costs, costs in respect of the administration of housing benefit and council tax, and business rate collections and income from the Council's business rate pooling arrangements. This budget is informed by planned delivery of the Council's capital programme, the Treasury Management Strategy, routine cash flow monitoring and the external borrowing requirement. I would now like to address the issue of savings. Council approved a total of £19.5 million of savings in the 24-25 revenue budget, comprising of Directorate savings of £11.6 million and £7.9 million of Council-wide savings. In the year ended 31 March 2025, £10.9 million, or 56% of the approved savings, have been delivered. Savings not delivered recurrently in previous years have been carried forward into 25-26 for continued monitoring and delivery, and the Council has made significant progress in the delivery of approved savings for 25-26 and savings brought forward from previous years, as reported in the Q2 budget report presented to Cabinet at the meeting held 20 November 25. At Q2 25-26, 51% of total savings have been delivered, with a further 40% assessed as on delivery and a balance of 9% assessed at risk. Total savings of £20 million are proposed in the 26-27 budget. These savings include a range of proposals to control costs of service delivery, increase income from fees and charges, manage demand for council services and high-cost demand-led budgets, and deliver efficiencies through review and transformation of services. These savings will include in community wellbeing £7.375 million, children and young people £3.348 million, economy and environment £7.204 million, and in corporate services £2.027 million, giving a total of £19.954 million. As I've explained earlier, details of individual proposals and a description of planned activity for Directorate savings are included at Appendix B and in individual Directorate budget statements at Appendix C. We are also committed to providing additional information, and this will be published ahead of this week's Scrutiny Board meeting. The impact of savings proposals have been considered, and this is documented in the Equality Impact Assessments, which have been published as part of this report. The process to identify savings for 26-27 included a review of discretionary, preventative, enabling and mandatory services, and the levels of service provision by reference to legislative and regulatory requirements. This review considered options to stop, reduce or identify alternate funding sources for non-mandatory services, opportunities for savings and efficiencies in services with cost pressures, and options to increase income generated from services where permitted. Specifically in relation to community wellbeing services, we considered the services that they deliver for adult social care as alike to digits on our fingers, and sought not to cut off these digits, but rather to lose some weight from around our middle. The residents who require these services are in general the baby boomer generation, the majority of whom have worked for their whole life, creating the wealth of the country, and a large number of whom have served our country. At this stage of their life, when they turn to their country to look after them, it's not just a statutory requirement that we provide these services. More, it is a moral duty that we provide these services. Delivery of savings at a time of increasing demand and budget pressures remains a significant challenge for the Council. The challenging savings targets set and the difficult decisions taken to deliver efficiencies in both services and the size and shape of the Council form the basis of Council's future financial strategy to ensure a financial, stable and resilient Council. This strategy is underpinned by robust financial management and continued expenditure controls, accuracy in forecasting and effective collaboration between service and finance teams. The Auditor's annual report for financial year 24-25 notes that there are no significant weaknesses in respect of arrangements for financial planning, alignment of financial plans to other operational planning, and in identifying and managing risks to financial resilience. These arrangements, assessed by external audit, underpin the 2026-27 budget setting process to support the preparation of a realistic and deliverable balanced budget. The audit report highlights an improvement recommendation in respect of the achievement of savings in 24-25, and the Council has made significant progress in the delivery of approved savings for 25-26 and savings brought forward from previous years. And this is noted in the Q2 budget report presented to Cabinet on 20 November 25 and highlighted above in this report. The audit report provides valuable independent assurances that the Council has robust financial planning arrangements in place to identify all significant financial pressures and risks to financial resilience and to support the sustainable delivery of services in accordance with strategic and statutory priorities. The key financial risks and mitigating actions are detailed in the table at para 137 of this report. This is significantly different from last year due to the impact of the Fair Funding Review, with 3 risks, namely DSG, volatility in government funding streams and increasing demand for children's and adult social care being assessed as high, 2 risks, interest and inflation and potential overspend and non-delivery of savings required to balance the budget being assessed as medium, and then the other 2 being low. The MTFS published Appendix A to this report demonstrates the significant impact of the Fair Funding Review over the medium-term period. I'd like to highlight the significant MTFS gap summarised at para 3.3 onwards, an estimated gap of around £20 million next year, £31 million in 28-29 and £32 million in 29-30, a total of £83 million over our MTFS period. Our future financial strategy will be our start point to resolve this gap, which will be our immediate focus from April onwards. Herefordshire Council has a record of robust and effective financial management and is committed to delivering planned savings and managing expenditure within budget in order to preserve the future sustainability of this council. The planning assumptions and estimates which inform the 26-27 budget and MTFS to 29-30 are realistic and prudent, and there are appropriate arrangements in place to ensure the Council is able to identify and manage risks to financial resilience. Cabinet will propose the 26-27 revenue budget for recommendation to Council at its meeting on the 5th of February 26. The report to Cabinet on the 5th of February will include the revenue budget 2026-27 with its 4 appendices, Annex A, the medium-term financial strategy, Annex B, the total Directorate savings proposals, Appendix C, the Directorate budget position statements, and Appendix D, the Treasury management strategy. Finally, Council will meet to approve the 2026-27 revenue budget and supporting appendices at its meeting on the 13th of February 2026. Any changes to the budget proposed by Cabinet at the meeting on 5 February as a result of outstanding information noted above or be incorporated into the final budget to be considered by Council. In conclusion, Herefordshire has been hit hard by this Labour government's unfair funding review. Herefordshire has faced a £30 million funding gap, not because of mismanagement or overspending. It is the direct result of government divestment in rural areas. Residents here now receive 40% less per head from Westminster compared to those in urban councils. The government's contribution to our core spending power has fallen sharply, and they expect local residents and businesses to make up the difference. However, this Conservative-led council does not shirk from challenges, and we have and will continue to deliver a balanced deliverable budget that demonstrates our commitment to protect the most vulnerable, maintain essential services, and invest in Herefordshire's future. I strongly recommend this draft budget and commend Cabinet to approve both of its recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoddard. I very much appreciate what I think is one of the most comprehensive reports to be presented to put forward a proposed budget. I think, you know, if members of the public have got on record a full comprehensive outline of all of the requirements that you have to take into consideration, all of the key strategic concerns that we have, and all of the measures in place to address the problems that you've highlighted. A special personal thanks to you, Councillor Stoddard, for being resolute as always and having your finger on the pulse with all things finance related. It's one of the most important things that a cabinet member can do, is make sure that the finances are under control, and I wholeheartedly thank you for everything that you've done, not just in the lead up to preparing this budget, but all of the hard work that you've done when you hit the ground running way back in May 2023. So thank you very much. But of course, I'm sure you'll be happy for me to say that it's a team effort. And I would like to also thank the Cabinet, our Chief Executive and the Chief Finance Officer and all the teams and the directors for all of their hard work in putting forward the strategies and solutions to propose a budget that achieves all that we want to achieve in the face of a lack of government funding. This council's been living within its means for a very long time. I'm proud of that track record, and we're not wanting in this proposal to go for exceptional funding support. We've got sound financial management and a great track record of that, and I'm really proud of the fact that this is the proposal that we're putting forward, subject to scrutiny, of course, and any other additional changes that we may want to make in light of more information. For my money, all councils up and down the land receive financial support from government. That's fair, given the pressures and demands on local government. But what is unfair is when that allocation of funding is directed towards urban areas and not directed towards rural areas where it costs more to deliver services. We can go into more granular detail later on about how much more it does cost to send a carer in a car 30 miles away than it does if you send a carer just across an urban area that's only 10 square miles. But the broader picture is this: we're underfunded from local government to cope with the pressures of demand-led services. However, as you've so eloquently said, Councillor Stoddart, that's not us not having a solution to the situation that we find ourselves in. And I think what we see before us is some really robust and sensible measures to address the challenges of a demand-led service, whilst at the same time making sure we have good value for money and protect the most vulnerable. So I heartily commend all of the efforts of the team, and welcome all of the views that councillors will have in the due course leading up to the 13th of February. But on the outset, Councillor Stoddard, before anybody else steals your thunder, thank you very much. Right, so I look forward to other Cabinet members for any comments if they have any. I mean, Councillor Stoddard has been very comprehensive, but Councillor Price.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Stoddart, for your appraisal of a difficult situation. I think I've probably been more involved in the discussions in this budget than ever in any budget previously, because I know how difficult it is, and I have to say thank you to Rachel Sanders and her team for the work that they've done to have got from the position we were in on the 18th of December to today has been a fantastic response to be able to come up with a balanced budget. Whilst we seem to have got most of what we want out of it, we seem to have been able to balance the budget. We've got to a position where we can still move forward and we can hold our heads high. The big issue that is always overhanging it, and we park on one side, is this DSG override. We don't seem to know what is going to come of that in 2028, but for the sake of education and everything to do with teaching our young people, that override, if it is detrimental to this council, is going to be decimating to the finances of not just this council, but every council in the land. And we have to just not park it on one side. We have to take it to government at every opportunity and deal with it in some way or other, because it will bankrupt virtually every council in the land that it's been allowed to go on the way it is. It's a major, major problem, and I just raise that now because I think going forward into what will be the next administration, that is a crippling thing to have just left there and saying it's got an override on it from government. I don't know what the answer is, but we've got to deal with it. And I suspect that we, through the offices of Rachel and her team and RSN and all the rural networks, we have to push and push and push, because we will not be able to deal with it in 2028 when it comes around that the government think they're going to unload it onto the local authorities. So well done to you all. I've got nothing more to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Any other Cabinet member? Councillor Swinglehurst, and then we'll go to Councillor Durkin.
Yeah, so I'd like to join my colleagues in congratulating the 151 officer and team and Councillor Stoddart and also Councillor Stoddart for his presentation today. And it's lovely to have him back. Fair funding review. Fair, honestly, what's fair about it? You know, 40% less funding for our residents. It's absolutely, it's dreadful. And also, you know, somehow there's this assumption that delivering services in a rural area is cheaper, when in fact we know full well it isn't cheaper, which previous government recognised in the Rural Services Delivery Grant, which we lost just before Christmas last year, which was £7.5 million overnight hole in the budget. There seems to me, you know, something about rural areas and this current government that is problematic. Look across the piece at what they've been doing, and so it does leave us with with quite a challenging budget. And I do congratulate the officers for managing to pick their way through this situation. One of the things that we have obviously coming up is the food waste collection service, which is part of the Environment Act, and normally a government will then allocate a new burdens, because we are being required to do something we didn't previously do. And this government's going, no, it's all right, it's in the settlement. So you know, not only is there less coming in, but we're expected to do more with it. So I think it's a deeply unfair funding review. And also, just for point of clarity, on page 78, the table on page 78, lines 8 and 9, should be the garden waste collection service, not food waste, which I was actually up at the depot the first thing this morning, looking at we have 2,000 bins ready to go out for the subscribers. So yeah, that's the garden waste collection service, which we're just starting. Thank you.
Excellent, and a nice plug there for a great service. Right. If there are no other, Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Chair. I fully endorse what Councillor Swinglehurst has said, of course. If this is fairer funding 2, God help us if fairer funding 3. As the portfolio holder for car parking, I wanted to say a few words about the Pop and Shop proposal, the scheme. We can introduce 30 minutes of free parking in all council-operated car parks from April 26. It's a scheme that did not exist at the moment. We are delivering to a key commitment to support local businesses and shoppers. The aim is to increase the use of small retailers and independent businesses and promote vibrant high streets. The new Popular Shop scheme is designed to make short trips, local trips easier and boost footfall for these shops and cafes and services across the county. It's a balanced approach that supports local businesses while maintaining essential parking services and reducing barriers to short stay parking as the initiative encourages quick visits. So I obviously endorse this matter. Thank you, Councillor Stoddart, and thank you to your former One Officers team. As I say, thank you so much for your attentions to the budget.
Thank you very much, Councillor Durkin, for that elaborating on what we hope will be a really positive scheme. Councillor Hercombe.
You can have too much praise, Councillor Stoddart, so I'm not going to praise you, if that's okay. Just wanted to pick up on a couple of things. So firstly, it may be lost in the detail, but we have in this budget funded the flood risk team as part of the base budget. If you remember the flooding incidents we had last year, we brought in additional staff on a temporary basis. They are now permanent, so I welcome the commitment from the Economy and Environment team to make that team permanent. I'd also like to highlight that we've done significant work with parish councils in terms of drainage, public rights of way and the Lensman scheme over multiple years. The PROW public rights of way and drainage in the last 2 years under this administration, but the Lensman scheme a long time before. There was a worry that we wouldn't be able to continue these given the government funding, but I can confirm that we have been allocated enough money to run each of those schemes this year. And I'll be communicating that with parish councils soon, but I think it's hugely important we continue to support parishes in local delivery. It's often cheaper and more effective than doing it from a central area anyway, and the drainage work has significantly improved our highways and stopped some deterioration, so it's a very welcome move. The other thing I'd like to draw out, it's probably not in the paperwork, but we've managed to find £50,000 this year for litter, and so we're doing a county-wide litter strategy. I'd like to thank colleagues in the Green Group for bringing that forward over the last 12 months, and we've worked with them, and hopefully that will bring a noticeable difference to the county. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hercombe, for highlighting those key points. Much more detail will come out as the budget is pored over and considered and scrutinised, but it's good to get those key messages out there for clarification so that people can be drawn attention to them. Right, okay, go straight to the vote. No, sorry, go to group leaders. Right, I have 3 group leaders online, and we're graced by a group leader in the room. Anybody want to go first? Okay. Councillor Simmons, seeing as you're in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to first of all to say thank you to Councillor Stoddart. I appreciate this has been a very difficult time for you. So welcome back. I'm very pleased to see you here. I know you've continued to work, much to the advice probably not to, but well done. I would also like to thank our Chief Financial Officer, who has obviously done a huge amount of work over Christmas to get to this stage. I will reiterate the absolute lack of fairness in the fair funding review. It is atrocious that we, as a rural area that is already suffering from significant rural deprivation in areas, to have this level of cuts put onto us in terms of our core spending power. It is just unacceptable, and we really need to keep saying that maybe government starts to listen. However, this is obviously then setting the context for some really important decisions to be made, and I will save most of my ire for the capital budget once we go through that. But it does have significant implications on our revenue budget and what we are then forced to save and cut and change in that. It's very difficult to see at the moment, pre-scrutiny. We haven't got the detail of the line-by-lines of the budget. I welcome some of the announcement, and thank you, Councillor Hercombe, for finding that money. It's really important to the people of Herefordshire and to tourism that we don't live in a waste site, which some of our rural and urban roads are becoming with the litter. I think it's vitally important to understand more detail, and I note that we have meetings with the Chief Financial Officer to look at the spending and delivery targets that are being set by directorates. I'm particularly concerned by reference to the Talk Community Reshape and what that will actually mean in terms of reality. I would just plea that if there is any consideration that you are going to be refocusing this on adult social care and the meanings of Talk Community
I would be deeply concerned about supporting our young people. They are not picked up in the Community Young People's Directorate. That's sort of statutory provision. I've been banging on about this for 2 years now, and it's vitally important that our young people and things like youth services are appropriately supported in the community. I would like to see, and just make a plea as well as these detailed budget areas come out, for the reference to the pilot for the extension of the bus travel pass for 16 to 19-year-olds. It was voted on at full council last year, and I'd really like to see a line in the budget that is allocated to that, because as we know, if there isn't a budget line for it, it doesn't happen. So that's something I'd like to be picked up at scrutiny as well. I'm also slightly concerned about partnership working and investment with other sectors and organisations, and the proposed savings within there, particularly potentially with regard to Hoople. I'd like to see more evidence for how that's going to be achieved and whether we're able to maintain that working. I think I'll probably leave it there and talk about the capital budget later. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those observations and comments, which we've taken due notice of. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you to Councillor Stoddart for that comprehensive presentation. I'm not going to talk for nearly as long as Councillor Stoddart did. Everybody will be pleased to hear, but I do have a little over a page of something to say, so I hope you'll indulge me. Independents for Herefordshire sympathise with the current minority Conservative administration as regards the very difficult situation the council is placed in financially as a consequence of the patently unfair outcome for Herefordshire of the government's so-called fair funding review, and the county having had further grants withdrawn which had previously quite rightly recognised the high cost of service delivery and significant levels of deprivation within our rural and sparsely populated county. After suffering under the privations of 14 years of Tory austerity, it's deeply disappointing now to be practised upon by this tin-eared Labour government, which neither understands nor seems to care about communities outside of its urban heartlands. To bring forward a set of ostensibly balanced budget proposals, which do not rely upon exceptional funding support in such circumstances, is a difficult task, and Independents for Herefordshire appreciate the huge efforts of our officers and of Cabinet members in developing the proposals to this point. Providing assurance that the level of savings required to present a truly balanced budget are credibly deliverable is no small task. In previous years, councillors in my group, both directly and through the scrutiny process, have sought sight of the delivery plans for savings, which were then being assured, were thoroughly thought through and prepared for delivery. These plans were never forthcoming, and many of the vaunted savings proved to be equally elusive. Independents for Herefordshire seek again firm evidence this year that the savings now proposed by Cabinet are genuine and deliverable. We do not believe that all of them are, despite the well-meant assurances provided to date. The last-minute publication of over 120 pages of equality impact assessments for these savings late last night as an appendix to today's agenda pack gives a glimpse of just how last-minute some of the thinking is as regards the impact these savings proposals will have on the most vulnerable of our residents. As yet, there is not information at all about the delivery profile of these savings or evidence that partner organisations are on board and supportive of the changes in their working and delivery, which are implicit in the changes being proposed. We in no way play down the enormous challenges in managing massive cost pressures across the board, but particularly in the statutory areas of adult social care, public health, children's services and education. A glance at the supplement to the agenda pack containing the medium-term financial strategy shows that the projected hole in the council's 3-year finances has increased by a massive £80 million in just 12 months. When we were in administration, we were jeered at and derided for having a £19 million gap in an MTFS, which contained clear proposals for that hole to be more than filled by known forthcoming freedoms to charge double council tax on second homes and empty properties. There are no credible plans to close this £80 million gap beyond actions set out in paragraph 3.4 of the MTFS, which, quite frankly, simply lists the sort of actions any reasonable person would expect to have been already deployed to the maximum as part of the business as usual of operating a council in a cost-effective manner, and will in no way render £80 million of as yet unknown savings or new income. You will hear no jeering from us at the position presented. It is serious, and it shows the council at the very edge of its ability to operate anywhere close to the level our residents continue to expect. If we are to continue to deliver for Herefordshire, Independence for Herefordshire believes strongly that this council must deploy technology and deliver transformation of its services in a way it has signally failed to deliver on to date. It must also become an excellent customer to its suppliers and strategic partners, and to work effectively with public and third sector organisations to maximise the benefit to residents of aligning our respective resources in delivery. We must bring our partners with us and must not behave in a heavy-handed fashion or fail to communicate and consult in a meaningful and timely manner. This is a mammoth task, and we do not have a sustained track record of evidencing the necessary skills in planning, communication, flexibility, commercial competence and delivery. Independence for Herefordshire will continue to support and encourage our officers to develop further the skills and behaviours necessary to sustain the delivery of public services in these very challenging times. We shall also consider to test and challenge the sustainability and deliverability of this minority administration's plans and the probity, transparency and resilience of its decision-making processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, for those comments. And two more group leaders, Councillor Davies or Councillor James. Councillor James.
Yeah, right. Thank you. I endorse the comments about Councillor Stoddart. Probably the most thorough presentation of a budget that I've seen for many, many, many years. The problem is that so much of the explanation goes over the head of the general public. I mean, there are simple facts that most people will understand. The fact that we're receiving far, far less money from central government. As many have said before, the so-called fairer funding is what should be called unfairer funding. And the councils like Herefordshire are going to suffer as a result of that. But the problem is that we can't go on like this. You know, we've had year after year after year above inflation council tax rises. And we cannot sustain it. We've now, because of government decisions, we've got to go 3 more years of above inflation. Well, I hope inflation doesn't go above the level that we're looking at. That will create even more problems. But, you know, it can't be sustained. There has to be something done, and a different form of funding of local government. It's unsustainable in the current climate. You know, it's getting to the point where even if you own your house without a mortgage, you are encumbered for the rest of your life with substantial financial responsibilities through the council tax level, but not based on ability to pay, but on the house that you live in. The savings, I think Councillor Stoddart said 9% is at risk of the savings as outlined. And I think that's where the difficulty, and I hope the scrutiny committees will be looking very, very closely at this. You know, so often savings take too long or are unachievable. And I do think that that's where we need to concentrate over the next months, looking at and post actually the council tax meeting in February, to look at how we are going to achieve those savings without causing great difficulty to the public in Herefordshire. But further than that, I mean, we have to wait and see what comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James, for those comments, and to all group leaders for their comments. I think we've, Councillor Davis has gone off the call, so what I will do is, in the event that she comes back, I will allow her to have some comments, but we seem to have lost her for some reason, not entirely sure why. But as I say, if she does come back, we will go back to her accordingly. Right, okay, so you've had those comments from group leaders, their suggestions and concerns. Councillor Hercombe.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on the publication of the equality impact assessments, because I think Councillor Harvey's insinuated that means we weren't prepared. Many of those statements have dates attached to them that were early December. The publication isn't the reality. They weren't done overnight. They were done some time ago. Equally, the final draft settlement from the draft settlement from the government was only published on the 17th of December. So I think in the circumstances, the finance team have responded at pace. And I don't think we should be pointing out the date of that as some failing on our part. It's not. If the government wishes there to be more time, the government should make more time for the finance settlement to be reviewed by councils.
Excellent point to make, Councillor Hercombe. Thank you for that. Right. Okay. Oh, Councillor Gandy.
Yes. It's just a comment on with regards to Talk Community. Yes, it is obviously in there with as a proposal for some savings, as are many other items with regards to the Community Wellbeing Directorate. But quite clearly it states within this that this is out for consultation, and a consultation will take place. Members will have an opportunity to participate in that consultation, and then we will look at the results of that, and then we will come back with our decision on this. So at the moment, anything is open for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Gandy, for that that clarification. Right, okay, I don't think there are any further comments. We have a proposal so that we can put that forward to the scrutiny process, the further cabinet, and then eventually for full council on the 13th of February. It's proposed by Councillor Stoddart. I will second that. All in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thank you. So we now go to the other item on the agenda, which is the draft capital investment budget and capital strategy for 26-27. The agenda item begins on page 91 of the agenda pack. And since Councillor Stoddart did such a good job of the last item, I'd like to invite him to present this item as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks to recommend to Cabinet the draft 2026-27 capital investment budget together with the draft capital strategy for 2026-27 onwards. The capital programme reflects capital investment which generates benefit to the county for a period in excess of 1 year. Full Council at its meeting on 7 February 2025 approved the current capital programme, which is included in this report as the base capital programme which was approved at that meeting. The approved capital programme is provided at Appendix B to this report as at the start of January 2026. The reprofiling of the capital spend was carried out in Q2 in line with the external audit recommendations and reported separately to Cabinet. Forecasting against the budget is reported to Cabinet in the quarterly report, which includes an up-to-date forecast of the timing of the capital spends, and the Q3 forecast report will be reported at the February meeting of Cabinet. The additional grants received are listed at the bottom of Appendix B and have all been approved by the Chief Financial Officer in year. The proposed capital programme for 2026-27 presents an ambitious programme of capital investment aligned to the priorities of the Council plan across people, place, growth and transformation. The proposed additions for 2026-27 represent projects which will deliver increased temporary and emergency accommodation to respond to homelessness and housing demand across the county, mitigate key revenue budget pressures through alternate school provision and pupil referral units, improve the use of technology to deliver efficiencies and innovation in services to residents, deliver new infrastructure to support growth opportunities for housing, strengthen resilience of our school and property assets, improve public rights of way access, and provide continued investment in the county's road network. All proposals are included in Appendix A, along with outlined strategic business cases at Appendix E. Appendix A provides details of the proposed additions to the existing capital programme that have been identified and the impact of approving these additions. 14 capital investment budget proposals totalling £44 million have been identified to be funded by prudential borrowing, capital receipts reserve and revenue reserves. I would like to take this opportunity to remind everyone of the difference in capital funding, where on completion of the project, Herefordshire Council own an asset that has a value as against revenue where there is no asset, only a service. Responding to affordable housing needs across the county remains a high priority for Herefordshire Council. A further provision of £10 million has been added to the capital programme to bring forward schemes to deliver affordable housing to meet the Council's urgent need for provision, provide better homes for those in need, and reduce the high cost dependence on temporary accommodation. This funding is based on borrowing, which is repaid through the income from housing benefit and the reduced cost of temporary accommodation, along with applications for Homes England grants and some provision of corporate funded borrowing where required. The Council is committed to identifying solutions to develop affordable housing, and work is underway to review best practice options through engagement with developers and registered providers. An historic building fund of £5 million has been added to fund future works to preserve and restore historic buildings in Hereford, including the Museum and Art Gallery, Shire Hall and Town Hall. The approved capital programme includes an existing allocation of £0.75 million to fund Town Hall improvements. This historic building fund will be held centrally and is delegated to the S151 officer to allocate funds to specific projects' budgets once final contract prices have been received to carry out the work required. An informal review of all prospective capital funding requests has been completed to ensure the financial impact of the funding requests has been taken account of in the medium-term financial strategy. And concurrently, a review of the current capital programme took place, and it was agreed to remove a number of projects that were no longer needed, or alternate funding had been identified to release borrowing and capital receipts with utilisation with new bids. The projects that have been removed from the proposed capital programme at Appendix C are employment land in market towns. £4 million of capital receipts use has been removed as there have been no projects come forward at present to spend this budget, and any need will be reviewed in the future if business cases come forward. City and market town public realm investment of £1.2 million has been removed. Whilst this work will still be carried out, it will be funded from the local transport grant allocation. Road safety schemes. £3 million is removed. However, once again, this work will still be carried out, but will be funded from the local transport grant allocation. Council school transport fleet, £0.35 million has been removed as a result of the review, and any future likely delivery model being based on leased vehicle and not purchases. Estates Programme of Works. There has been a review of all of the various budgets in the capital programme, and where work is not deemed as required presently, the budget has been removed, or where the asset has been transferred, then there is no longer a requirement. A total of another further £2.6 million has been removed across a number of projects. As part of the 2016-2017 local government financial settlement, the government announced new flexibilities allowing local authorities to use capital receipts to fund transformation expenditure. This guidance was extended and updated in 24-25 to extend the freedom for local authorities to use eligible capital receipts up to 2029-30 to help fund the revenue costs of transformation and release savings. The direction permits authorities to use the proceeds from asset sales to fund the revenue costs of projects that will deliver ongoing savings, reduce costs, increase revenue, or support a more efficient provision of services. The Council intends to take advantage of this flexibility to support the financing of qualifying expenditure to deliver transformation change programmes across the organisation. Therefore, £1 million in 2026-27 revenue transformation works will be funded from the use of the Capital Receipts Reserve, subject to receipt of the expected capital receipts in year. I would like to highlight that inclusion in the capital programme is not approval to proceed. Each project will be subject to its own governance, a full business case will be presented for approval to Cabinet where required, and compliance with the Council's contract procedures rules as applicable. The capital strategy has been developed in accordance with CIPFA guidelines, and the purpose of the capital strategy is to tell a story that gives a clear and concise view of how the Council determines its priorities for capital investment, decides how much it can afford to borrow, and sets its risk appetite. It should not duplicate other more detailed policies, procedures and plans, but instead sit above these and reference these to allow those seeking more detail to know where to find it. That said, it should provide sufficient detail so that excuse me. That said, it should provide sufficient detail so that it provides a single accessible source for the reader. The strategy is included at Appendix D and is in line with the guidelines, requires Council approval. The proposed additions at Appendix A total £44 million over the next 4 years. This is to be financed from £36.3 million of prudential borrowing, £5 million to be funded from the use of Capital Receipts Reserve, and £2.7 million from capital grants. Where projects are in the capital programme but they depend on grants, if the grant request is not successful, the full project, including any match funding, will be removed unless a revised project is approved within the revised allocations. Individual capital scheme resourcing implications will be detailed in the approval to proceed decision, and Appendix E contains the outlined strategic business cases for each of the new projects. Appendix A shows the proposed capital additions for 2026-27. Appendix B shows the current state of the approved capital programme. Appendix C shows the total proposed programme. Appendix D is the proposed capital strategy, and Appendix E includes the outlined strategic business cases. Individual capital scheme resourcing implications will be detailed in the approval to proceed decision, and Appendix E contains the outlined strategic business case for each of the new projects. Whilst this budget setting document will not detail specific environmental impacts, consideration will always be made in minimising waste and resources use in line with the Council's environmental policy. An initial environmental assessment has been included in the outline strategic business cases that were reviewed at scrutiny, and these will be developed in scope for each project when they seek approval to spend and a separate governance decision. For all capital projects, monthly budget control meetings give assurance on the robustness of the budget control and monitor to highlight key risks and to identify any mitigation to reduce the impact of pressures on the Council's overall position through the phasing of spend, identifying and securing scheme changes for alternate funding sources. Capital projects inherently give rise to risks in their delivery, both in time and budget. Individual scheme reporting and associate project boards exist to mitigate these risks. The proposed additions have been reviewed in relation to risks, both in deliverability, costs, impact, and associated scheme interdependencies. The individual scheme details of the risks will be provided as individual schemes progress to approval to delivery. I fully endorse this report and strongly believe that this ambitious capital programme will deliver on this Conservative-led administration's commitment to the people of Herefordshire, whilst being clearly aligned with the Council plan and its vision of delivering the best for Herefordshire in everything that we do. I have no hesitation in commending its three recommendations to Cabinet for their approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart, for a very comprehensive but shorter presentation. So thank you for that. Much appreciated. and for clarifying those key points. Cabinet members, does any member want to make any comments at this stage? If not, Councillor Hurcombe.
Yeah, I'd just like to highlight a couple of things really. The first is the addition in the capital programme for public rights of way. Although it's not explained in the papers, this is to address a backlog in replacing bridges in the county. We have over 100 public rights of way bridges that are currently unsuitable and out of action, and those footpaths are in various conditions. Some have had to be closed. It's quite often popular routes for local residents, and I think the least they deserve is for those bridges to be replaced. Some have been out of action, I think, for 6 or 7 years now. So this is a long-term failure we're addressing across successive administrations. So hopefully, with the addition of this money, we can get on and put as many bridges. So thank you for recognising that as a problem and addressing it.
But using that capital allocation, we've witnessed, haven't we, where communities have worked together, volunteers have worked together with local providers and the council to get much cheaper, better outcomes.
Yeah, we've with the £500,000 that's gone directly to parish councils over the last 2 years with public rights of way, we've managed to do some really exciting projects. I'll highlight again the Webley Bridge. They replaced it at a cost of 3,000, something that would have cost us 18,000 to do. So we can do a lot with local residents. Obviously, with this, it's going to be at pace, and there's a high volume of bridges. But I would like to see a significant portion of it done with the communities in mind.
Excellent, thank you. Right, okay. A very important part of the capital programme, but a part of a comprehensive whole. Right, okay then. Well, Councillor Harvey's got her hand up first, Councillor Simmons, so I will defer to Councillor Harvey first, and then.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'll not go on as long as I did on the revenue section either. We've heard and seen the severe funding situation that the council faces as a consequence of national funding formulas and government policy working to disadvantage this county, and all efforts need to continue to be expended to challenge this deeply unfair situation. That said, it is also incumbent upon this minority Conservative administration to act prudently and to modify its plans and ambitions to reduce the damage that the current situation causes to residents and to statutory service delivery in the immediate and the near term. During our time in administration, we deferred making some important and compelling investment decisions while revenue pressures on some statutory services were very volatile. This capital programme shows no such prudence or pragmatism. Indeed, planned borrowing is shown to be rampant. There is no indication that delay in locally funded programmes is being considered, whilst attempts to obtain central government or national highways funding for such initiatives continue to be pursued. In addition, we believe that insufficient provision is currently being made to reflect the known obligations to address the dilapidations and restoration of listed buildings, including Shire Hall and Town Halls in the city, and the need to bring the city's much-loved museum back into operation. And greater funding will inevitably be needed in order to deliver on those projects. And there's currently no credible plan to deliver the much-needed county special educational needs provision following the withdrawal of the funding promised by government. Again, a deep disappointment. Meanwhile, funding to bring forward much-needed employment provision in the market towns is being removed, whilst no meaningful effort has been expended to bring forward development on land in third-party ownership. It's laughable for the Cabinet member to continue to trot out the patently untrue statement that no spending will take place on these capital lines without full business cases. The spending on lines linked to the Southern Link Road and the Western Relief Road give the lie to this at a single stroke. This cavalier attitude of spending public money and towards spending public money and the delays in tightening up on the financial regulations to prevent such roughshod behaviour in future is a sad state of affairs, which I hope external auditors will pay close attention to. This capital programme proposes more than £122 million of borrowing over the next 3 years, alongside an already stated £84 million hole in our 3-year financial plan. This does not reflect the nature of the current times or the real and immediate needs of our residents, and it needs to be revised as a matter of some urgency.
Thank you very much for those observations. Councillor Harvey, Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Leader. And here we get to the political choices. The capital budget that is being proposed is having a significant effect on our revenue budget. And as we have already heard at length, there are extreme pressures on that budget and savings that are being made. The capital budget is suggesting areas where we require additional funding, and yet again without the evidence base to support that. We are seeing an additional £5 million required for the Southern Link Road, and I refer to it as the Southern Link Road, not as your preferred phase one of a bypass, because we do not have any confidence that the bypass will be coming forward. There is no government money, as we can see. We are on the receiving end of a poor settlement, and we are on the receiving end of not having capital investment from government in this area. We cannot be expecting that that is going to be delivered. So we have this sort of double think where we've got a Southern Link Road being stated in the strategic outline business case as delivering some form of benefit to traffic, but without any evidence supplied at the point you're making the decisions. In addition, we are then being told that we are not going to have development coming forward that would lead to additional traffic. That may come at a later date, yet you're saying that it's allowing development of housing and therefore growth. So we're sort of mixed in our view and evidence base at this point as to what is being proposed and supported. So, you know, until we get that full detailed business case, and we've got, and this is why government does it through the transport analysis guidance, so that you set out what are the implications, what are the environmental impacts of that. We are not seeing that at the point you're making decisions, and that's why we won't get the funding for it from government, because we're not approaching it in the correct way, in the way the DFT likes it to be done. We're putting the cart before the horse because of a political ambition here, and we're going to end up having very unhappy residents when they realise they are not getting a bypass and they are not getting a second river crossing, and there will not be resilience to the network as a result of that. And for that, we're asking to borrow another £5 million in this challenging situation. If you could supply me the evidence that suggested all these benefits, maybe there would be some understanding of why we're being asked for more borrowing. I think in addition, we had said, you know, the Shire Hall wasn't deliverable for the budget that was set, and so it has come to pass, and we're being asked for more in the form of the historic buildings. We do have a responsibility as the owners of that building to ensure its condition, so I don't dispute that, but I think we would have had a library by now in Maylords if that had been the case. I think that also I'm deeply unhappy that we are cancelling or replacing one pot of money, 1.2 million for the Market Town investment strategy, with 1.2 million funding from our LTP. Yet again, this is money being taken out of our rural market towns to enable funding borrowing of projects in Hereford, for example, the Southern Link Road. It's you know, we were relying on having the doubling up of that, of LTP funding coming through, which is predominantly for active travel, alongside the £200,000 pot per market town. So the fact that that's now being cancelled and replaced with the LTP funding just means that less investment for projects that we all want within our market towns. I very much welcome the strategic housing and emergency need borrowing, because that actually is reducing our revenue expenditure, where we are looking to develop a portfolio of temporary accommodation of our own instead of relying on hotels and bed and breakfasts. And there's an absolute requirement for this immediate needs, and I'm very supportive of that. So that's where we should be borrowing, where we're reducing our overall costs on our revenue budgets, not for projects that we really need to be much more prudent upon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Councillor James, still online. You're available to comment?
Sorry. Yes, just welcoming the commitment to the historic buildings within the city, the museum or library, the Shire Hall and the Town Hall. I think we cannot abandon our heritage and our history, and to do that. As to the Link Road, I think the case, will be made out with it in the business case. But, we're going to have thousands of extra houses in the county, or government are insisting we're going to have, without the proper infrastructure. Then it becomes a nightmare, especially in Hereford itself, where the infrastructure isn't there for the housing that we're demanded to produce in the coming years. It's all very well for the previous minority administration members to bemoan the fact of the financial cost. They're not mentioning the fact that the revenue from extra housing that the council will receive, which is substantial, and that should be outlined for every 1,000 houses that are going to be built. It's a substantial amount of money, extra revenue income we will be having, and we'd be certainly in a better position if we hadn't have had to have paid back over £20 million for the previous cancellation of the Link Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. I couldn't agree more on that specific point. We are where we are, but we're strategically at a disadvantage because of the decision of a previous administration to cancel projects that were funded and the funding went elsewhere. However, I think it's not a question with the capital allocation, Councillor Stoddard. I would say it's not doublethink, it's single-mindedness to actually do nothing when we've all agreed that we need to grow our economy, we need to invest, we need to have more better paid homes and jobs, better paid jobs and affordable homes for people so that they can establish themselves and contribute to the economy of Herefordshire. But we look at the capital allocation of this, I think we look at the capital allocation of this proposal in isolation at our peril, because we've already, in talking about market towns, we owned land in Ross-on-Wye. We've turned that into a Ross-on-Wye business park, which is the work is going on for that, which shows our administration's commitment to economic development and investment to provide those jobs. So I think to say that there's no investment in market towns, we can't do it all, but we can make contributions that are under our control. And I think that our administration has shown a commitment to invest where it can, when it can, on economic development elsewhere. So I think we've got a good track record of that when you see it in the round about the whole capital programme, rather than the amendments that you're proposing that we will agree on today, subject to any other comments from Cabinet members, and also the recommendations from the scrutiny process as well. Councillor Hercombe.
Yeah, I just want to address one of the points that Councillor Simmons raised, which was the suggestion that it was LTP money that's been put to offset the 1.2 million for market towns. It's LTG, so it's the local transport grant money that's been put in. Now, granted, the LTG could be used to fund elements of the LTP, but the two are distinct and separate. And what I would say is when the 1.2 million was allocated in the capital budget, we hadn't had the announcement of future funding of the LTG. In September 2025, the government confirmed that would be 29 million for Herefordshire. So it's only right and prudent that we use the government's money first before we use the capital budget. So it's not cancelling it, it's just using government money at the right times. The other thing that no one appears to have mentioned at all, which is remarkable for Herefordshire, is the highways. There's £5 million there for resurfacing. That matters to every single resident. May 23, we all stood for election. I think all of us wanted action on the roads, whatever political colour you were at the time. This £5 million, if we look back since May 23, the total investment in Herefordshire's highways now stands at over £60 million of the council's money, covering structures, everything, not just resurfacing, but it's a significant commitment from this council, and I think every resident can see the difference that that's made, and I hope that although we're facing funding pressures in the future, that we continue to prioritise long-term investment over short-term fixes like potholes, and I really welcome the continuation of that resurfacing programme.
Thank you, Councillor Huckerman. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, my point about you can see part of a capital program in isolation, but you look at the whole picture and the cumulative effect that our investment has had over the last several years, it makes a huge difference. And like I said recently, I got an email from a member of the public in a very remote area where there was a little lane but serviced many residents, and they said the effect is transformative. So we should never lose sight of that. Okay, so thank you to group leaders for their comments, and we have a recommendation for approval. Did any other cabinet member want to speak? Yeah, Councillor Bramer.
Thank you, Leader. It was really, I wanted to say regarding the historic buildings monies and indeed the long-term investment, that you should remember that when these heritage assets are brought back into their full glory, into their full use, there will be extra monies available through the generated by the letting of parts of these, or indeed the other grants that we may attract in the time. And I think that it's a long-term investment, but for these heritage assets, they're long-term things that have been there for several hundred years, and we should be looking at them in the long term as being the right thing to do by introducing the historic houses or historic buildings grants now that we realise that we have them only for a short period. We are the custodians of them, and we need to put this money into them now, but it will generate money that will be returned in the very long term. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bramer. Right. Okay then. Is there any... Oh, Councillor Price.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Tiresome subject of being the SLR Phase 1 bypass. It got cancelled in the last administration, to the joys of the Department of Transport and the Treasury, because there was so much demand for infrastructure projects, and it is difficult to get back the trust that we had with them on getting funding going forward. In 2012, and it was mentioned earlier today, that the local enterprise partnership were instrumental in setting up the local enterprise zone down at Rotherwas. We had a business park there, and we've invested in it very heavily with the help of the LEP as it was in those days. Fundamental to their belief of growing that, there was constrictions put on it without infrastructure to support its full outturn. Reading from a document in 2014, the LEP has already successfully applied for £27 million of funding via the Strategic Economic Plan to build a road link in the south of the city between the A49 and the A465. This represents the first leg of a potential full Western Relief Road around the city. Guess what? 2014, that's 11 years ago, it was at a cost, and having lost that funding, we have to start again. These fundings do not just happen, they have to be earned, and the trust that was lost because of the cancellation of it was staggering. So if we keep on having this 5 million, this 35 million, this 43 million, guess what? Goes on in this statement, it says the River Wye crossing will cost an estimate additional 67 million quid. That was only 11 years ago. We're hearing talks of 300 million quid now. If you're going to invest in the future for the benefit of the youth of this county, which has been my absolute base understanding of being a councillor, then we have to take the risk of doing these things and just cancelling it because nobody's got the ambition to want to grow our economy. Here we are waiting for a new local plan to be developed for housing of staggering numbers of housing. We have to have the infrastructure and we have to deal with it. I've mentioned earlier about the DSG deficit, £80 million that's going to be by 2088. No plan for how the government's going to deal with that. We had a plan, we were trying to deliver it, it was cancelled, and that has put us back some years. I'm not going to argue that, I don't care what you say about it. I believe that the Western Bypass and the SLR is a necessary piece of infrastructure for the future of this county, and I will stick to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price. That was very eloquently said, and I appreciate that sentiment and clarifying and really putting into focus what the real issues are with regard to the capital programme and the necessity to take action for the benefit of our residents. Okay, so thank you for those comments and for the contributions from group leaders. We have a recommendation. Councillor Stoddard, are you looking for a seconder? Because I'm happy to second that. All cabinet members in favour? Excellent, thank you very much. So now we have two budget proposals in front of us, both a revenue budget and a capital budget proposal, which will go to scrutiny now on the 23rd of January, which will be this Friday. I'd like to thank all the scrutiny chairs for being on the call or being in the room. I really appreciate that, because it's going to, I think, really help in the discussion and the scrutiny process. So I thank you for your time. I know you're going to be busy again on Friday and subsequent meetings, but I really value and appreciate the fact that you've been on the call and listened to the discussions. And I really appreciate the feedback or comments from group leaders, especially thanking them for acknowledging the fact that it is unfair funding, and it doesn't matter what party you belong to. We can all want the very best for Herefordshire, and we can all be very upset about unfair funding for Herefordshire. But this is the opportunity for the government of the day to rethink the matter. We have presented clear evidence why we think it's unfair funding. We don't want magic bailouts. We don't want anybody to just suddenly magic away our responsibilities. We are very good at keeping to those responsibilities. But what we do want and what we do expect for the residents of Herefordshire and all of those people who rely on our services to be fairly funded. And I think we've demonstrated that despite that unfair funding, we have a plan. That will go to scrutiny and then ultimately to full council, and I look forward to those debates. But thank you once again to everyone for your contributions. Thank you. The next meeting of Cabinet will be Thursday, not Tuesday, Thursday the 5th of February, but it will be at 3 p.m. I will now formally close the meeting and ask for the live stream to be closed.